First of all, I'd like to welcome you all here. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I know this time of the year is crazy with event after event, so we appreciate you coming here. I also want to give special thanks to the Davis Foundation for actually funding this strategy that you're going to hear about today. So thank you very much for that. So without further ado, I'm going to have Jim come up and talk to us. He's going to make a presentation, and then there'll be some time for some questions and discussion afterwards. So Jim?
Thanks. Actually, what I'm going to do is stop at different points in the presentation and see if you have any questions, just so you don't have to retain the questions too long. And I'm sure you'll have some. Just as background, I wanted to make sure we were all starting out from the same point. What was I actually asked to do? So I was asked to look at a set of issues, and they're in no particular order up here. To many clusters refers to the fact that the incubator has made some attempts to specialize in IT and clean tech in a couple of areas, and the question was asked of me if I could reflect on that and talk about options, because the work that my company does is all sector focused. So it's all the clients I work with, some 60-odd projects around the US that we've worked on, whether they're innovation clusters or technology commercialization centers or incubators, they're all sector focused. So it was a logical question to ask. I was asked to address sustainability and think about how to solve that, funding options. And that's going to be the first thing I address, because that was the thing everybody was most interested in. So I'll talk about what are some of the funding opportunities, whether the SEC could be self-sustaining by August 2013, which is a date at which point the kind of formal agreement with EDA that was negotiated when this building was built ends. I'm not sure it has any particular meaning for the incubator, but it could. So I'm going to talk about that issue and what sustainability means in the incubation world. How you could define success. I'm going to put forth some concepts about how to think about that. What external non-financial support should you all be looking at, and I will talk about that, and how far geographically should the SEC reach out into the region or the state. So these were the issues that I was asked to look at. I'm going to address them all. What I'd like to say is, when I talked to Marla about coming here, all of these questions really related to a more basic question, which was, how can we take the incubator and the SEC to the next level? Okay, how can we move beyond what's been done, all the success it has and any issues it has, and create a vision that would build on that and take it to the next level. And so, as you will see in what I address, that's really the heart of this issue, is what could you do next? How big can it be? Where could it go? So I have a set of initial observations. I just want to make a comment about this first slide, where it comes from. So I talked to most of you. I talked to about 20 individuals representing organizations, entrepreneurs, and various business people. And that's really the way that I do my work. Although I have some experience, I know what best practices in incubation are. I ran an incubator that was chosen as the top incubator in the country in 2008. But one size doesn't fit all. So I tried to come and talk to a lot of people, and I have a lot of observations. I could spend the hour and a half talking about my observations. These are the observations where I found that there was agreement where I saw widespread agreement across the 20 people that I talked to. So these observations are not mine per se. I didn't think them up. I kept hearing them. So I just want to touch on what those were. So the first was that most of the people I talked to went to some length to make sure I understood that this building had a history, that it had existed, it had some level of success, and I think that's important as you think about where should you go next. So people, I think, felt it important that I understand that we weren't starting from zero, and I think that is important. And I think that when you go to build for the future, it's important to understand what you've already accomplished. The second thing was that there was pretty widespread agreement that the incubator and the Enterprise Center itself had gone through some significant challenges, space, leadership, whether there was even a director on board over the last few years. And people seemed to be in general agreement that you were recovering from those problems and making progress. So that you've got Marla here as a director, as most of the space is filled. So I didn't come in at the low point, but I came in with a past history of some problems that just need to be acknowledged. And I understand, I heard a lot about what they were. I'm not going to list them all. I also heard from numerous people the importance of having a more sustainable, better funded incubator. And I heard from many people about the need to have a more diverse client base. There were a lot of people that indicated to me they didn't feel that the clients in the incubator represented Springfield and the surrounding region in terms of diversity. And so I think that's an issue that we need to take a look at. Another area where there seemed to be widespread agreement is that there were a small number of partnerships that existed, but the partnerships that existed for this incubator weren't as strong as people would like to see. So they would like to see more involvement by more groups partnering with the incubator throughout this area and region. And finally, I heard almost universally from the board members and mentors that I talked to that they did not feel fully utilized, and that they had commitment and support for the incubator, but they didn't feel that their skills were being fully utilized, whether that was being asked to do things that fully complemented their skill set, or whether it meant having enough clients to work with. So there was, although the differences existed on what that meant, it was pretty widespread that they had more energy to give and more ideas than were currently being utilized. So that's the set of issues that I got consensus on. And then I have a set of my own observations that come out of these meetings and discussions with Marla, but I will say these are more personal to my observations than a consensus from the people I talked to. So the first thing is that we're talking about more than an incubator here, and that both enhances and complicates the issue. So the Enterprise Center and the incubator are not the same thing. And whether it's solving real estate problems or thinking about what the opportunities are to work in the community, it's something that's not true in all locations where incubators exist, where you have kind of two pieces of the organization co-located. And kind of falling out of that, the operating structure with the incubator, with the Assistance Corporation that runs the technology park, and with the especially current involvement of UMass and Marla coming down here and splitting her time between here and UMass. It's a complex organizational structure, so that as we talk about where we should go, I just would want everybody to remember that we've got to operate within that structure. It's not my goal to rip it apart and dismantle it. And so it takes some care to think about how to move forward when you've got that kind of complexity. And then finally, although I think most of you would agree, I just want to make the straightforward comment that, in my opinion, the incubator is not currently financially sustainable. What do I mean by that? Well, because those words can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. In the incubation world, financial sustainability really means that you have multiple revenue sources that support your incubator. There's not a single incubator in the country that is fully self-sufficient from the fees that it charges clients. It doesn't work that way. They're entrepreneurs. You're going to provide them, some set of them at least, housing. You're going to provide them support and advice over a long period of time while they're starting up. They can't afford to pay for all that, and the salaries of the staff needed to do it, to pay the rent, to pay for furniture, and all the things they get. So incubators reach what we would call financial sustainability by not relying too much on any single or any two, let's say, sets of revenue, and client fees would always tend to be one of them. So all incubators have some sort of what many people would call subsidies, because those revenues, they might come from grants, they might come from foundations, sponsors. So self-sustainability is the right way to talk about it. And really, I've spent 15 years studying this issue, and when you get down to it and people in incubators are honest about the programs that are good and self-sustaining, the real issue is they don't fail because one source of income to support them goes away. They don't fail because the entrepreneurs can't afford to pay all the expenses. They have enough lines of revenue, enough methods of receiving income so that everyone can be comfortable that the incubator is not going to be in financial trouble if the financial picture changes slightly because of supporters that come and go. So by that standard, this incubator is not currently financially sustainable, although that is not to say that it's in financial trouble at this immediate point in time. But if the one or two sources of income that currently exist were to go away or be drastically cut, the incubator would be in serious trouble. So the goal is to get away from that kind of model. So I'm going to stop there. Those are kind of observations. I'm going to move on to solutions. The current revenue streams that exist really are support from the community college and the technology park management that's associated with it, and client and tenant revenue fees. Tenants being those organizations that are in this building that are not entrepreneurs starting up companies. And a little bit, very small amount of support historically from some sponsors. So I'd call it 2.2 lines of revenue. The last one's not very strong. So if you realize that kind of incubator best practices would call for 6 or 8 different revenue sources, that shows you the sustainability problem. Now, to get those other streams of revenue to make the incubator sustainable, often what you have to do is offer other programs. So it's not that this incubator has done a poor job of capitalizing the revenue streams they have or capturing fees. Nothing wrong with the fee structures and what you're charging clients here. The issue is that there aren't other programs to generate revenue. So the rest of this presentation, basically what I'm going to do is, because people were concerned about how you make enough money to make this incubator sustainable, I'm going to address the options for revenue first. Then I'm going to take those options and I'm going to describe what the programs would be that would generate that revenue. So I'm not going to give you any potential program suggestions that don't generate revenue, and I'm starting from the point where you all started, which is how do you build a stronger program that's financially more sustainable. But by the time we work through that, you'll have also see the content possibilities, what the incubator can do to go to the next level. But I've tried to carefully construct it so that all the ideas that I'm going to present to you also create revenue potential. Looking at this, what I'm going to talk about is options. Okay, these are opportunities. So I am personally not recommending one over another, and I'm going to give you 9 different options for increasing the revenue of this incubator. You only need about 4 or at most 5 of those to become financially sustainable. So I'm not giving you a list that I think you should incorporate them all. I'm giving you a set of choices. It's not my place to make the choices, but I think that I have the experience to be able to identify realistic opportunities for increasing revenue. So I want to talk through them, and then, like I said, I'll talk about what the programs would actually be for these. So how would you, reach a stronger state of financial sustainability? So here's 4 of the 9 or so options. So the first one is that you could generate program fees and grants if you strengthen your sector focus within the incubator. So sector focus means like focusing on IT or clean technology or material science. I mean, there's a lot of different areas that you could focus. So today in incubation, about across the U.S., about 50% of the incubators that exist focus on different industries or technology areas and develop some expertise. However, of the new incubators being created in the United States, 80% of them focus on some sector or technology area. So the trend, which is strengthening, is to try and develop some strength in 1 or 2 sectors. Most incubators cannot handle doing more than 1 or 2. For an existing incubator, this does not mean that you need to stop doing what you're doing. You're not talking about pushing any clients out that don't exist in these sectors or not accepting ones in the future. This is an add-on to what you do. So you have this incubator as you think about it. But really, although the incubator talks about having some focus on IT and on clean tech, it's not very strong. So if you were going to focus on one of these areas, you would have mentors that were highly specialized in the area. You'd have advisory board members on your advisory board that were experienced. You'd have people from the universities and colleges that are in an area, pick one, IT or clean tech. They'd be strongly identified within the incubator. And then the staff would develop an expertise where they would know the investors in this area. They would understand if there are law firms that have a practice that specialize in that area, they would know it. They would know and have on a list the entrepreneurs in the community in that area. So you would really start to hone in on an area. And the advantage of this when you do it is that some subset of your clients, those in that sector as they come in the future, they all have a common background. They're all in some area. They can talk to each other. They have a set of mentors and business people they can talk to. And investors get more interested in visiting because they can talk to 5 or 6 or 10 people in one sector, a sector they invest in at one time. Some are ready for investment, some of them they're tracking. And by the same token, there are organizations that will fund an incubator if you are focused in a particular sector. Federal, state, private. So the one that's most popular right now is clean technology. So if you had a clean technology focus within your incubator, you would have eligibility from funding from the Department of Energy. They have no interest in funding a general purpose technology incubator. They'd only get interested if you were focused in some way that showed some depth for them, so that they could start talking to you and your incubator clients about things that they wanted to pursue, that they were interested in, that they wanted to fund. It's a source of potential funding in addition to the funds that you bring in now. Another possible way of increasing the funding is what most of us call in the business call affiliate programs. So these are non-resident clients for the incubator. So entrepreneurs who are starting up a business, but they don't want or can't come to Springfield and locate their offices inside the incubator. Now, the fact that you don't have non-resident services offered to entrepreneurs is unusual in today's incubation world. It's the model that existed when your incubator was created. But probably 80% of the incubators in the United States that are good have a non-resident program. So the incubator that I started when I created an environmental incubator in 1994, I didn't have any non-resident clients. I had 20 clients. But by the time I stopped doing that incubator, almost 15 years later, I had 40 clients, and 12 of them were inside the incubator, and all the rest were non-resident. I served the entire state of California, from Northern California. So you can serve a region, and you can offer services, and you get more client fees. So you broaden the people that you can help, and you stop having this conversation, which I heard over and over again, which people from outside of Springfield say, well, yeah, that's great, but it's too far. I can't drive. I don't want to drive from UMass. I don't want to drive there from Northampton or wherever it is. So you stop having that conversation because you're starting to offer services to the full region. So this is a common practice, and on this practice alone, you could double the client fees coming into the incubator. The only thing that you need to do is structure the program carefully so that it doesn't discourage people from coming to Springfield inside the building. And that's not too hard to do. Most incubators have figured out how to do it because the set of services inside the building are still better than someone would get if they were non-resident. And I'll just give you one. There's lots of examples, but I'll give you one. So one of the strongest reasons for people to support incubators, and one of the reasons they work, is because they support startup companies for a long period of time, 12, 18 months, 24 months while they're starting up. And that staff is there every single day. It's not an appointment with a lawyer, it's not a class, it's not a short-term intervention. Every day, every time there's a new problem in your startup organization, you can go to the staff for help. So it's problem du jour, and that's how incubators work. And it's what really differentiates them from most other programs. Well, if you're in the incubator, it's problem du jour. You're right there, you walk in, incubator directors very seldom require a formal appointment process. You knock on their door, you start talking to them if they're not busy. If you're a non-resident incubator, maybe you would have a weekly conversation or visit or discussion over the computer, some sort of organized, focused interaction, but it wouldn't be daily. So there's still advantages to being located physically in the building. But even if you had a weekly conversation and the ability to call in or come and visit if you had a special problem, that's still more of a long-term engagement than you would get from almost anyone else. So this is another opportunity. A third one is scholarships and grants for reaching out to either economically disadvantaged clients or minority clients. So as you're diversifying your incubator, let's say you want to make it look ethnically more like your community. Just pick anything. Let's say you want to bring in more Latino-owned businesses. In most states and in most communities, there are foundations that will support that effort. That's the community they support. So they're interested in it, either from an economic standpoint or an ethnic and racial standpoint. You can go to them and say, I'd like to reach out to this community. We'd like it to be better represented in our incubator. And we could use some money to market that, reach that community. Or you can set up scholarship programs, which I've done multiple times in multiple incubators, where they say, we'll pay the fees for that business to come in if you find them for the first year, just to get this program going. So it's both an expansion, and we'll talk about the program, and it's also funding. A fourth one is technology commercialization. So some incubators help commercialize technology, and some really don't focus that way. So what does that mean? So I'm going to talk a little more detail about what it means here, but in general, it means that you're trying to help people doing applied research get their technology into the marketplace. So that could be labs, universities, colleges, or people that are out in your community and they have government SBIR grants from the government to do research on their own, separate from a university, and helping those technologists get their products and technology to the market and actually have it become available to the public or consumers or purchasers is the commercialization aspect. And when you do that, there are grants available from many agencies that are focused on this issue, whether it's manufacturing, or whether it's a sector focus, or whether it's the National Science Foundation, or NIH, or the Department of Energy. There's funding available to help with that commercialization because it's a big problem. Typically, less than 10% of applied research grant-funded projects reach the marketplace. So there's a lot of room for improvement. Some of the other areas that are available, some incubators run a regular series of programs that are focused on training and education. So the event you had here earlier this week that some of you came to have that foundation from Boston come in and speak to an audience, some incubators it might be free to their members, but they might charge $25 to each person that wants to attend. Or they run a training event. So they say, we're going to run a session on how startups can work on getting their company financed and what the various financing mechanisms are. And you open it up to groups of people outside of the incubator, and you charge. And there are incubators that run 1 or 2 of these programs a month and have a very steady revenue stream from the community by running those programs. So it's an option. Also, partnership. So I want to distinguish sponsors from partners. So in the world that I'm in, partners means kind of a few key relationships. So the community college here is a partner with the incubator in a very clear way. So there's an opportunity for more partnerships than currently exist for this incubator. And those partnerships often are reflected partially by financial support. So one of the issues you can look at is, okay, the community college provides annual financial support for this incubator. Who else could you turn to that might do that? And I'll talk a little bit more about this possibility as we get into the program side. Another opportunity for funding is regional or innovation cluster grants from the federal government. So I'm going to spend some time in a couple slides talking about this because not everyone's familiar with it in a minute. But right now, the Obama administration's methodology for doing federal economic development grants is regional innovation clusters. So this is groups of people, academic, government, and private sector working together to try and create specific areas of innovation within their community. And I will go into some detail on how to do this, but there are grants available for this, and I'm going to also give you some of the grant funding options here in just a minute. So another area is equity or royalty fees. So most technology incubators, they have an agreement that they will get a small amount of equity or a small royalty from the companies that are successful, so that when they reach a certain level of sales or they get a certain amount of funding from an equity investor, that they grant, so on equity it's usually small, like 1 or 2%. They agree to give 1 or 2% of their equity to the incubator in addition to the fees they pay. And it's really a success fee. It's saying to these companies, let's take equity for a minute. If you're successful and someone invests in you and you have a liquidation event, you are acquired or you go public, we're asking you, we're a nonprofit, we're asking you to share a tiny percent of your success with this incubator. And they sign an agreement to do that when they enter. Now, if Marla were doing that, she could paper her bathroom with most of the warrants that would come out of that, because 90% of them would be worthless. The companies would, they might be a good private company, but they'd never go public, they'd never get acquired, and that stock and that promise of equity wouldn't be worth anything. But for 1 out of every 20 or 25 or 30 companies that would get acquired, or the rare one that goes public, then there'd be a substantial income that would come into the incubator. So this is a standard practice in technology incubators in the US, and again, was not at the time that this incubator was created. So when I created my incubator, I did not have that kind of a program, but I later adopted it. Of course, after the company went public that I would have made the most money on, then I had the sense to put the program in. And then the last one is increased sponsorship or fees. So most incubators have 10 or 15 sponsors, banks, law firms, or other groups that provide them either regular or one-time gifted financial support. And they get public recognition for this. They show up on the website, they show up on the signage, it shows they're affiliated with the program and supporting it, and it's a greater source of income to support the incubator than this incubator currently has. So those are the 9 areas of financial revenue opportunities. So I know they're not all perfectly clear, so now I'm going to talk about the kinds of programs that each one you could implement for each one to earn this kind of revenue. So the first one was sector focus. So you already talk about an IT and clean tech focus. And if you were to set up programs and networks in this area, one or both over time, then it would create this revenue stream possibility from agencies that fund this. So to do this, one of the things that you have to do is clearly declare it. And the second thing you have to do is, so that's the talk. And then you've got to walk the talk. You actually have to have and create a network of people with expertise in that area. And what happens when you do this, in addition to potential funders that might say, well, if you're going to do that, if you're going to do clean tech, we're a foundation that supports improving the environment. We're a federal agency that funds efforts in this area. You get clients approach the incubator that wouldn't have approached it when it was a general technology incubator, because they look at that and they say, oh, I didn't even know there was an incubator, and I didn't know that there was one that was focused on the area I'm working. I'm going to go in there and find out what's going on. And then if all of a sudden they also find out that they don't actually necessarily have to reside in your incubator to get help, you're going to get more clients. So you're going to get client revenue and potential support from agencies to do it. But you've got to actually, it's not something to take on lightly. You need to declare you're specializing and then create the backup for that specialty. So another area in this, when you think about education and you've got affiliation with 2 education organizations already, with UMass and the community college, you have the potential to strengthen the programs and with other colleges in the area with respect to the faculty and students. So right now, there's not any kind of strong internship program. In fact, it's not as strong as it had been in the past in some cases. There are some attempts, but they're not at the level you'd like to see them. So you can strengthen the ability for students to do internships with startup companies. And that's one of the ways you create the culture and do the training. And by the way, there again are funding opportunities for this kind of thing. So if the community college and the incubator were to approach both the state and federal government with respect to being interested in doing green workforce training and putting some of those students that take the training into internships in a clean tech sector that you were creating, you'd find there's funding available, both at the state and the federal level, for green workforce training. And they would be especially interested in a program where you could say, we can guarantee that we'll have whatever it is, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 startup businesses at any given time that can use interns coming out of that program. So that's one of the main problems with training programs, is that they don't often get practical experience to follow up their training. Job would be the best thing, but if you can't commit to a job, which almost no training program can, then an internship is a valuable practical experience that goes on the student's resume. So that's an example of a program that you could do that would be focused in the education and training area. Then collaborating more with the organization that runs this technology park, they have a mission, a state designation for their mission, and it's broader than the mission of the incubator itself. So there's opportunities to partner and collaborate on that mission. We've had some discussions about those opportunities. They may or may not pull the community college itself in, but there are programs that could be set up. There is still some excess space at this, in this technology park, so there's opportunities to work together, and they again would provide funding opportunities. The same thing's true kind of when you think about businesses throughout Pioneer Valley. If you start offering programs across the region, you all have to decide what the region is. I'm not sure. Is it Pioneer Valley, or is it the Knowledge Corridor, or is it Western Massachusetts? I get confused between the differences, all those, but I know they are different. And so if you think about it and you start reaching across these areas and you offer services across these areas, then you need to develop marketing to this area, and you need to make it clear that you've got services available. And this starts to develop your leadership on a regional basis. So you start to be saying to the region as a whole, we are doing some things that we think could be helpful throughout the region, and that's what starts to create innovation clusters within a region. So you have the opportunity to work in this area, and I'm going to go into, after this next slide, I'm going to go into a little more detail about how you would do that, because the federal funding for innovation clusters and what they mean is not clear to everyone. So I'm going to go take a slide or two and develop it in just a minute. So I mentioned this a little bit, but a lot of incubators have had a lot of success at targeting clients in order to create diversity. So for example, when I started my incubator, almost everybody that came initially was a white male. All right, I was doing an environmental incubator. So over a period of about 3 years, I decided I wanted to address that issue. 1 year, I spent developing programs that were focused on attracting women who wanted to start companies in this environmental area. Then the next year, I decided to try and focus on the Asian community. Next year, I started to focus on the African American community, and then a few years later, I did Latino community. In each one of those situations, so why weren't they coming to the incubator? Was it really that they weren't starting any businesses? Somewhat, but the bigger issue was that my marketing and my incubator program were not even known in those communities. They communicated with each other, but they didn't communicate with me and the people that I had on my board. So we had to actually go to organizations that knew these communities better and work with them and to make our services known. And when we did it, as I mentioned before, we had organizations that said, you know, we've been working on this kind of problem. We're trying to solve economic development problems, equality problems, job creation issues. So if you're going to do this, we'll provide funding to support it. After 5 years, so I ran my incubator for 15 years. After 5 years, after the first 5 years, after I went through this process, for the next 10 years, always in the incubator that I ran, half of the population of the founders starting the companies and coming to the incubator were either minority or women. So it gave us a incubator that reflected the diversity in California. And you can do the same thing here. I think you need to, but it's not a burden. It's an opportunity. And it's an opportunity. The diversity will increase the innovation within the organization, and you can increase your funding at the same time. Yes?
What was your turn rate during those years?
In and out of the incubator? So most incubators have some sort of expectation that they set up. So you have to give the message to people that this is an incubator for startups and you can't stay forever. So in my incubator, we had a 2-year maximum period, and companies stayed on average, some stayed 2 years, but on average 12 to 18 months. And just for a variety of circumstances, not only pushing people out, but having them outgrow the place, we tended to turn over half the people in the incubator each year after the first 2 years of operation. So, so when I had 20 companies, the turnover would be 10, and when I had 40, it was roughly 20. And that would be actually quite typical for incubators, but it varies by the sector and by the region.
So you had a similar turn rate for the external incubators as well?
Actually, not exactly. So more of the external clients were in that 12 to 18 month range, and more of the resident clients were in the 18 month to 24 month range. The reason had nothing to do with preparing them to enter the business world and getting them far enough in the startup stage. The reason was that the businesses inside the incubator that were resident liked it so much that you were more likely to have to force them out if they did not grow it. So, where the ones that were receiving the services outside, living in a commercial setting or whatever they were doing, they kind of got their services and moved on more quickly. It didn't really seem to affect how successful the companies were, which of those turn rates they were on. But the people just, they liked being in the incubator, so they didn't, if they didn't outgrow it, they didn't leave until you made them. So then another area on technology commercialization, you have opportunities throughout the region, but I don't think there's any doubt that the big gorilla is the University of Massachusetts. That, you know, you have people that'll be doing SBIR grants that are outside. You'll have people out of other colleges and universities doing technology, but I think the big opportunity is the University of Massachusetts. And so one of the options is to focus more on understanding what kind of help the University of Massachusetts would be interested in if you were to work on technology commercialization, helping them with scientists and faculty and students that were doing applied research. This can be accelerating the movement of the technology into the marketplace. This can be mentoring people on startups. It can be entrepreneurial internships. It could be a lot of things. This was a primary focus of the incubator I ran. We actually had the best technology commercialization rate of 110 clean tech commercialization centers that were studied around the world. We were very focused on getting technology to the marketplace. There's a method to doing that, and if you all decide to go down that method, I'm very happy to share just from our experiences. But what it really takes is to listen carefully to the university and people in the university and understand what kind of help they need and what they'd be interested in. And to get beyond the conversation about the fact that it's in Springfield and it's too far to drive. So you have to you have to go to the university and offer them the services there. And that's, or to do it, which you can lots of times, over the phone, looking at a computer, doing some sort of WebEx program. There's a lot of ways to do it without traveling. So also, on the partnering issue, let's take the knowledge corridor. On the partnering issue, there needs to be more discussions with potential partners. Those that reside in this building, the community college itself, the University of Massachusetts, but others in the region. There needs to be discussions about the opportunities for partnering. And I think, again, if you offer non-residential services, then those discussions become a different kind of discussion, because people recognize immediately that you're not asking people to move to Springfield in order to get the benefit. So more groups, I think, will be interested in partnering. And this can occur in ways that provide business support, and marketing support, and sharing in leads for clients, and in financial support. I think that if you start to explore these options, there are potentially groups of people who might be willing to support the incubator if it reaches a larger region. But the main point is the discussions need to occur so the incubator, Marla and the board and the incubator, they need to have the vision that that's what they're doing and initiate the discussions. Don't expect that the groups will come to you. And so that's just a slightly different mindset. I think it's a mindset that Marla has had in her jobs in the past, so it's not something new to engage the community, but that is one of the ways in which you can, let's say you increase the number of partners, serious partners, by 5 or 6. Well, I would predict that out of that, 1 or 2 will come with some level of financial support. So again, you'll further the goals of the incubator, take it to another level, but you'll also see some additional financial support. And then the last one I want to talk about and move into some slides to show you is to say, what is this, when I say regional innovation cluster, for those of you who are not familiar, what am I talking about? So kind of this is a definition, there are a lot of different ones. By the way, you have one of the leading experts in the world on this issue in Massachusetts, a fellow named Michael Porter at Harvard. He has studied regional innovation around the world. You can go on to his website at Harvard, and you can see this all explained at great length. And he has done analyses of clusters of innovation in Massachusetts and in just about every state in the union. So you have one of the world's leading experts in at least an aspect of this right here in Massachusetts. So when people talk about this, and I say, well, you, the SEC and the incubator, could help lead in developing a regional innovation cluster. What this is when you study regions that have the soundest economy in good times and bad over periods of years, what you find is it's not that they're focused on a particular industry. These regions shift as the industries shift. But what do they all have in common? What they all have in common is there's a level of innovation going on within the community that involves a network, an actual set of communications that goes on between the private sector, government, entrepreneurs, researchers. It's a dynamic. So I lived in Massachusetts for a while. I don't think things have changed all that much, okay? So I moved to Washington, D.C. to get to a place with less politics and better networks. And then I decided, well, yeah, but that was still kind of pathetic. So I moved to California, where we got really strong networks and clusters of innovation. So, but I thought about this a lot when I moved to Washington, that I was actually, this is God's truth, I was in a less political climate in Washington, D.C. than in Massachusetts. There's so many silos, so many turfs, so much history, so many things. But on the other hand, certainly within the Beltway, in the Boston area, they're much better now than when I used to live there at networking and innovating, and have developed a reputation that's pretty sound, that would put them in a leadership position. And it did not exist when I lived there in the 1970s, okay? So I worked for Digital Equipment Corporation for 7 years. When I left Digital Equipment Corporation, my Rolodex had 100 names in it, and 95 of them were in Digital Equipment Corporation. I went out to California and worked a similar amount of time, or even after the first year or two that I worked there, for that 100 names that would be in my Rolodex, you know, only 5 or 6 were inside the company I worked with. All the rest were outside. Boston's getting better at that, and Western Massachusetts could. And that's part of what an innovation cluster would be, is you all would do a better job of talking to each other and working together than you do now. And it would be in the enlightened self-interest of the entire region. So if you're a more visual person, what a lot of people are, this is what an innovation cluster looks like. You have, at the center, you have some organization that's providing some leadership. And surrounding it, you've got things like incubators, entrepreneurs, industry associations, public agencies, universities, investors. You have that. You have that right here, okay? But it's not a regional cluster, okay? So the SEC and the incubator, they have their own cluster that looks just like this, but it's very localized, all right? And what we're talking about is, one of the options, again, I'm just indicating options, one of the options is to think about this organization as being more of a leader to spread this concept out more across the region and engage people. So why are people going to be interested? You know, you can say, okay, well, it sounds good, but people don't understand it. Why are they going to be interested? So there are some people that live in the universe of funding. So I thought, okay, maybe it would be helpful to just talk about what's going on right now in terms of funding. So the top part of this slide is the regional innovation focus of the Obama administration. So I told you that this is their method. They ran on this policy when he ran for office. He had a Brookings Institution report from a woman who is now the head of the Small Business Administration for President Obama, that she'd written on how to do this innovation policy as a federal policy. And she now runs the SBA. He ran on this, and he's implemented it. And currently, in the current year, the Small Business Administration has $200 million. The EDA has $40 million. And DOE has $600 million. And to get 1 penny of this money for any of these agencies, you have to show them that you have created in your region an innovation cluster. It doesn't matter whether it's Arkansas, or Wyoming, or Massachusetts, or California. It doesn't have to be a big urban area. It can be rural. In fact, there's as much money going into this in rural as there is in urban. But you have to show them that you have actually brought together academics and government people and the business community, and you're focusing on some area to try and create more innovation in your community, and that innovation is tied to the business world. That's the big change. In the past, you could do this just as the University of Massachusetts. You could show you had an innovation hub, and you never had to show that you were going to take this out, that you had a commercialization strategy, that you had commercial partners. Today, you do. To get the money, you have to show that you've created this. Clean tech, which is one of the sectors that you could think about doing, I just thought it'd be interesting to show the FY 2012 budget in clean tech, $90 billion, okay? DOE's got $29 billion that they have spent in the 2011 year, and they have innovation hub projects that go everywhere from $1 million to some that are $60 to $150 million. I'm sure UMass has probably competed on at least one of these. And recently, the region got one of these grants. Tell me again what the name of it is. So the iGreen New England region grant, $1.25 million, and you got it by showing that several states in New England were going to partner on clean tech innovation. So you already have the first example of this occurring. However, I will tell you, in my experience, it's very difficult to implement a multi-state regional innovation cluster if you don't already have clusters within the state that are operating. So I think they're smart people, and if they are, the first thing they're going to realize is to make this $1.25 million program work, they have to connect to local organizations that can organize smaller regions within this. So there's already an opportunity for some funding. So this is just to say, it's just not something I've dreamt up. This is a funding opportunity, and the criteria, in addition to organizing this, understanding how to do it and organizing it, is economic need. So where do you think Western Massachusetts fits in? You'll be a lot more competitive than Boston, okay? Because many of these agencies are focused on trying to help in areas that have economic need, that are the hardest hit by the downturn in the economy and some of the things that have been going on. So you're well positioned if you could organize. And this organization, this enterprise center and this incubator, you are typical of organizations that often organize this, because incubators are used to doing this already, to setting up networks that cut across government, universities, and private sector organizations and associations and entrepreneurs. So they're already doing a mini version of this. So I actually go around the country and talk in conferences to people in incubation, helping them understand why they should be the leaders in a lot of these projects. It's not just get to participate. So Lawrence Berkeley National Lab recently hired me to work on this kind of project. I'm now in my second year with working with them. And the reason is because, you know, they have 1,800 people, okay? Several $100 million worth of research grants every year. They did not have a single commercial network to connect to. So the first thing they hired me to do was to create a commercial network so that they could put in an application in 90 days. So, you know, within 90 days, we were able to create a commercial network based on what we were already doing in Northern California for them to put in an application so they could show they had an existing organization. I got cities signed up, private businesses, we got 120 letters of support. So there's not many organizations that can do that kind of work. So this organization could seriously consider this as an option, to think about trying to organize the community. That's, you know, admittedly, that's the biggest probably vision on here, but it is one of the options. And just because the idea is new to some people, I wanted to just emphasize why it might be of interest. This is what an industry cluster would look like in any region. So you say, okay, you know, still, I don't quite get it. What is it? So here's what it is. Private industry, universities, colleges are sources of intellectual property and intellectual ideas, and they're potential partners for commercialization. So that's one piece. Most of the innovation, and some of it comes from private individuals that are doing this outside these areas. Industry labs, businesses. So the innovation that the government is funding is technology focused, by and large. Even if it's rural agriculture, it's agricultural technology. It's communication technology in rural areas. It's technology focused. So universities are a key source of this. And then entrepreneurs, people, what the government wants is people that can start businesses, can help assist in accelerating commercialization of technology. So they want to know that you've got entrepreneurs that can participate. So that's clearly right in the center competence of the incubator and the enterprise center and organizations like it. Then focused associations and organizations, economic development organizations, like some of you run, business organizations. It could be organizations of engineers. It could be organizations of manufacturing groups. So they want into these clusters groups who are focused to solve problems. So that if you have marketing partnerships, if you have manufacturing partnerships, they want groups like that participating in a cluster like this. Then utilities. So a lot of the work that's being done in economic development, it benefits the utilities. They sell more power. Or if it's clean tech focused, it helps them solve the problems of new energy sources, smart grid, clean transportation, clean water. So the utilities are often a partner, an active partner in these clusters. And then finally, government, especially with respect to not so much funding, doesn't have to be funding, but with respect to policies that would support innovation and economic development, and maybe test beds. Some government agencies can actually set up places where technologies can be tested, or people can group together to partner on projects. So for example, I'm working with the city of San Jose, and they're now currently almost finished converting a 40,000 square foot building that they owned. It's going to be a technology test bed and place for people to do grant-funded partnerships together. So they basically took an old building that wasn't much more than a warehouse, and they're turning it into a commercialization center. And they got 75% of the funding from outside city sources. In fact, their primary contribution was the building and the land, an old rundown building and the land. So those are kind of what the assets are, and those assets work in this community, okay? And they work in most communities, but they work particularly well in this community. And the other thing that's a little less tangible, but not just as important, is the number of colleges and universities you have, not just UMass. Don't think about research for a minute. Think of all the top flight. You probably, in Western Massachusetts, you've probably got, even excluding Boston, you've probably got one of the strongest bases of educational institutions as a region, even stronger if you include Connecticut and some of the people that would fall into that information corridor? No, what is it? Knowledge corridor. Sorry. It's even stronger, and that is a source of people to work, a source of academic pursuits, technical training, and innovation of many sorts. Okay, well that's it. I have one more slide, I think. So everything that I have talked to you about so far, it's really been focused on opportunities and options. But I've got a couple suggestions that I think are just necessary. So if you want to think about these other things, there's a couple things that I'll personally say, I think you need to do. And you can still pick among the options. So let's start though with the strengths. So I think in Marla you've got a highly skilled director and one that is already linking to both the community college and to UMass. That's a great asset. And you've got an improved short-term outlook. You're not looking for people to fill space, in the short term. Longer term, it's still an issue you need to face. And then you've got the continuing commitment of the community college, including financial support. So you've got these strengths, and you have, I should mention also, I'm going to talk a minute here about restructuring the mentor and advisory board. But one of the things that I was impressed with in talking to people is how many of the people have stuck with the program as mentors or advisory board members, even though it was struggling. And that's another strength, and it shows people believe in the program to do that. So what don't you have? Okay, first of all, have staff. So the average incubator of this size would have 2 to 3 professional staff people. You've got 1/2. Can't work, can't expand, can't do the things we're talking about with that kind of staffing, okay? And you've got, you know, I don't know what the percentage is, but you really only have a partial commitment from the admin person. It's not all the time focused on the incubator. So you don't even have the equivalent of a full-time person, or barely maybe, for admin and professional support, and a normal incubator would have 3 to 4 people to do that. Okay, but we need to be realistic, and I'm trying to stay pragmatic on this. So what do you need in the short term? You need, at a minimum, 1 full-time person in addition to Marla, okay, as a starting point. And you need the money to fund that. And you need the money to fund that before the new programs will produce it. I think that that's an achievable goal, you know. So I'm not suggesting you need to reach the 3 or 4 staff people that you need, but if you're going to do something and you're going to do it seriously and try and expand, you need at least a full-time person in here. And I think there ought to be some places that you could go and people you could work with, and you only need this funding for this staff person for a short period of time. I'd say 2 years maximum. So it's not a continuing support for it. It's just till these other programs can produce the income. So that's number one. It's, I think, really critical. Secondly, also addressing the staffing issue, when you have mentors and advisory board members that say they don't feel fully utilized, part of this is because there might not be enough clients to fully utilize them, but part of it is part of this vicious circle. You know, so, you know, Marla comes in, she's half-time, there's not enough people in here, she's focused on the people, and she's trying to do the jobs that 2 or 3 people should do, and this doesn't surprise me. You see this all the time, but she's got a resource, and she doesn't even have the time to fully engage the resource, and it's a very common situation. So another immediate need is to fully engage the mentors and advisory board and strengthen them. Get some new people in. I mean, it's not anything wrong with the people who are here, but add some new people. If you're going to focus in an area, add some that are focused. I know, and I think most of you know, or a lot of you would know, Marla already has a plan for this. The plan's fine. It just needs to be implemented. So it's a short-term, serious need that needs to be addressed. And the third one is, a lot of the things I've talked about, what they require is to create a new vision for this incubator and to be able to articulate it in a way that especially would engage stakeholders, serious partners, and the business community. So the problem, which I've talked to some of you about, is scale. There aren't enough clients, and until you change some things, reach out to non-residents or something, I'm not sure there would ever be enough clients. There's no really successful incubator in the United States that has been recognized as really successful with a client base of 12. You can't do it. You can't have enough impact. And then if you don't have enough impact, people don't care enough. And if they don't care enough, you don't get enough financial support. So one of the things, and a lot of people that run incubators fail before they figure this out, is scale. The way you have enough success and enough impact in the community is to have enough clients that some of them can fail and some of them can succeed. You can't, nobody can be good enough at picking winners from a small group. So you need more clients, and in order to do that, you need a vision that will be bigger. So you need to create this vision. You need to create it quickly. You need to be able to articulate it in an elevator speech. You know, we've all seen someone try and explain what they do, and your eyes glaze over, and they're still talking. You got to get this crisp. So what are you? What's the new vision? Create it, and think about the fact that when you do, you want to engage stakeholders who would financially support it, and you really want to engage the business community. They need to know that it's meaningful So in the end, that does mean you end up needing a bigger budget, more staff, you have more programs, the programs generate the revenue that you need, and you end up with more clients. So that's where you're headed, but I think the immediate short-term staff, restructuring the boards, and getting a vision would take you well on your way into the very short term for what you'd need to, also for all of you to be certain that things are changing. So that's it. Those are my suggestions and my observations. I'm glad to answer any questions. Yes?
Jim, this may be a little unfair, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So knowing what you know about incubators across the country and knowing a little more about our region and the size of this opportunity right now here, 5 years from now, I mean, could you just venture a guess at what you think the operating budget might expand by if we do all of what, or most of what you're suggesting and add some capacity, which clearly is needed here? What's our universe of opportunity? Is that fair? If you guess, at least.
You're asking about the University of Opportunity, or you're asking what it costs to do it?
No, I'm asking you if we do some or more, or some of what you're suggesting. You know the region, you know our size, you know our population, or at least you're more knowledgeable about it. Would you venture a guess that we would be X, we have X number of clients and like we have an operating budget of Y, or you mentioned the staffing, but that
Sure.
alone doesn't really tell you.
With an incubator this size, so the amount of square footage that you have, which is an expense, whether it's subsidized or not. With an incubator this size, if you make the assumption you're not going, for a minute, that you're not going to increase your facility size, because that is an option. But I'm just saying that might be more than I could do. But let's just assume for a minute that you're going to expand and you're not going to increase your facilities, all right? I think you could have in 5 years, you could have a client base of 35 or 40 clients at a time, a non-resident program. You could fund staff with 3 or 4 professionals and a full-time administrative person. You could be operating on a regional basis, maybe with some sector focus, and the budget that it would take to support that, which the programs I believe would support, it would be probably $1 million a year to $1.5 million, depending on the budget would only be higher if you were more successful. So you could do it I could imagine it operating at $1 million, but I could imagine that if you were highly successful, you'd have more money than that.
What was your operating budget in constant today's dollars?
The operating budget when I left 2 years ago was just under $1 million a year, and that was California prices. But we only had I moved from a larger facility to a smaller one over time. It wasn't just for the size. There were other reasons why I moved. But so at the time that I left, we had just under 10,000 square feet instead of the 20,000 square feet we had when I started. So that dropped expenses. And there's a lot of variables. Do you own it? How much support do you get? But I'd be fairly comfortable. I will say this. I can tell you the other thing is that doing, over 100 incubator projects, I've been fascinated that how often facility costs are half the cost. So another way to look at this is figure out what your facility costs are, double your cost. That's probably the low end of what your budget could be. So most incubators can have a staff of 3 or 4 people, and for a 20,000 square foot to 30,000 square foot incubator, which by the way is the average size of an incubator in the United States. And it'll take half their budget to pay for programs and staff, and the other half for the facility. It's interesting how often that's the breakdown. But there are a lot of things you could do to make it cheaper or more expensive. one of the things which hopefully maybe comes across indirectly is the way to have a meaningful and successful incubation program is not to think smaller. That actually additional programs generate additional income. And a lot of people's gut reaction as soon as they see a short period of financial instability is to cut back. And what that really does is ensure that you won't be financially solvent, you won't be successful, you won't have the impact, and you have to, you have to resist that urge to some extent and say, what's the potential for reaching out for new sources of revenue and new programs, not let's just cut back, because then you're kind of in that situation. Yeah, you filled the building, but you don't have adequate staff to really even to run the program you've got. It's just amazing to me that you can all hold it together with the staffing you have. And I'm not sure whether you can long term. I doubt it.
How closely aligned in the incubator that you oversaw was San Jose State?
They were number one, they were closely aligned. Number two, they were closely aligned in the way that the technology park and the college are here. So it would be a reasonable analogy. So my incubator had strong financial support from the city and weak financial support from the university, San Jose State University. We had strong involvement from San Jose State University and rather weak level of involvement from the city. So the city put up the money, but they counted on the university to provide the leadership, with one exception, which is because the city put up the money, they always, I went from running or setting up, I didn't run them all, one incubator to 5 in San Jose. So they kept creating more incubators because they really liked how it was working. And the city made the decisions on which ones to create. And then they turned to the university and asked the university to oversee them. Yes?
Just let me follow up on that quickly. San Jose State is a research university.
No.
No. Oh, they're not.
No research.
Okay.
Well, they object to that, but no more research than you've got here at the community college or at the technical college. No, they are not. They are not. We had, however, research universities to pull from, Stanford and Berkeley, just like you have UMass, and at approximately the same distance or further. So we had a resource, but it wasn't. And San Jose State provided students. They had a business school. They provided undergraduate, mainly engineers. They provided mid-level managers as graduates to some of the startup businesses. So they were very involved in the process, but no research. Yes?
Having just read Steve Jobs' biography, I found myself attracted to this notion of focusing on a few sectors. And it strikes me that this clean tech or clean energy sector is one that just seems awfully ripe here. You have, a Northbound Springfield as a whole, but you have a utility that's looking to be a test. You have a university that has an incredible amount of innovation within that sector. It just seems to me there's not really any downside from really making one of the first steps to be not to the exclusion of other things that are going on, but to take at least one of those sectors and say we're really going to try to elevate that. Am I reading what you're saying correctly as well?
I'm really trying hard not to say it because it's my passion. Okay, so I'm really trying hard to be objective. Okay, but I'll be not objective for 30 seconds. But I don't disagree with anything you say, but I'll give you the passionate answer to that. Okay, here's why you should do clean tech. Because if your incubator is involved in clean tech, you will all enjoy being involved in it more because it'll be doing work that the community will strongly appreciate, which is solving problems in your environment. And guess what? Occupation, all the students, high school, technical college, community college, university, what's the occupation they're most interested in right now? It's environmental. So you could fire up the imagination of more people And every community has these problems to solve. You've got to solve them, and a lot of them will never be solved unless they're solved locally. So it's, I believe, I mean, yes, it has the money, and the university's probably got great technology, but there's other reasons to do it. I just think it's a no-brainer, but I just spent 15 years of my career doing it, so who am I to be objective about it? But I can tell you that no offense, because some of you may have, like me, worked for Digital Equipment Corporation, which I did, but I was a lot more satisfied just with what I did for a living when I was doing environmental work. So it's just, it's a great thing to get involved in and for the community to be involved in. So it's very positive. It'll really, it could take off. So yeah, I think it's great. But, you know, you've got choices, and a lot of communities pick other things, and that you really should decide that. I'm not the one that can judge that. Yes, right here in front.
So when you listed the assets of the region in terms of the commitment towards this project, you talked about STCC, and it seemed to me there was a conspicuous absence of the university. Was that based on any conversations with the university?
I didn't intend there to be absence of the university when I talked about it.
STCC did not.
In what part of it?
Well, in one side it was.
Well, okay, so let me say this. There's
That was the financial part.
okay, yeah, in the financial part, that would be accurate. Okay, so here's how this works. Okay, in my opinion, for you to have partners, you have to show mutual benefit. All right, and so the SEC has not quite. They're on their way, but they haven't quite shown the university the mutual benefit in participating as far as they have with the community, with the technical college here. So, so there's a history here, and so it would be inaccurate to list them as equal partners. But I did try and state in here how important I thought it was to link to the university, and I think with Marla here, you have a person who's got a foot in each camp. And you know, personally, I wouldn't run this incubator without strengthening the ties to University of Massachusetts. It's critical to do it, I think, in terms of going to the next level, not what you've done in the past. So I didn't mean to minimize it, but it's just not as far along as the relationship is with the college here. So I was trying to just be accurate, but it's just as important, and they need to be a partner, and they need to really be excited about what's happening here.
And one other question, if I may. You talked at the end about having a clear vision and sort of an implicit passion for this project. And how many people did you interview?
About 20.
Did you uncover that commitment and passion in the majority of your conversations?
I did for the program that exists now, okay? And at the same time, from the same people, I encountered concern about the viability of the program and its long-term future. So I felt like there was commitment. I asked a number of the mentors and board members why they were hanging in, were they still committed? You know, there was a downturn, and you know, some people left, but I asked the ones that didn't why they stayed. And so I felt like there was more support than I would have expected from people that had been involved for a long time, but an equal interest in seeing something stronger happen than what they were participating in. So again, nothing I've said here should be taken as a criticism of what exists. It started the way any incubator would have started at the time it started, and it's survived, and the fact that it has survived this many years is to credit to it. And all I'm trying to focus on is the question I was asked: how can you make it more financially sustainable and take it to another level? And I haven't suggested that you stop doing anything you're doing. All of that should continue. And that's because it's valuable work. Yeah?
If you were us and we had you in this room tomorrow, we're going to start, where would we start? What would you recommend? Is it choose 4 or 5 of those? go out to the stakeholders, say this is what we're thinking of doing?
Well, at one level, I gave that to you. That list right there. That's the short-term work. In my advice is do not go any further until you've done each one of those.
But you need sort of the third one before you go to others for like the first one. We could do two.
Yes, I wasn't attempting to put it in an order, but I'm just saying I attempted to give you lots of choices because I think that's healthy. You know, I can never learn as much about you as you all know, so give you a lot of choices. Say here's a lot of ways that you could grow and earn more money, and then I tried to say that question you just asked. Here's what you better do quickly if you want to do the rest. That's in my opinion. Yes.
I just have a question about how would you advise this incubator to interface with some of the work that's already going on, or has been, there's a lot of momentum and investment around it, particularly you mentioned the testbed notion of the polio around green technology in that community. And I think when you say that we tend to silo or to look at everybody's creating the wheel all over again.
Yeah.
Every time we start, there's a lot of good work and a lot of cluster work and a lot of efforts that are percolating along. How can the incubator take advantage of that work that's underway and partner with or use some of that energy so that it's not trying to start something up
Yeah.
again as another initiative when there's a great deal of effort. There's just been a huge study in polio that's been.
So that's what I was trying.
And I know you can touch base on it.
Yeah, and I'll try and establish, say a little more, but that's what I was trying to address in this, and later in this one, which is there are programs going on out there, and some are sitting in this building, which that's to the credit of everybody involved, and others are not participating. And so talking about the options for partnering with these groups, it makes no sense to reinvent the wheel. As long as whatever that part of the wheel that's going on is being done competently, okay? I mean, we all know, we don't have to pick anybody's program in this room or anything you're affiliated with, but we all know sometimes there are people out there doing things and they're just honestly not doing a competent job. And so sometimes you have to do a little reinvention. But if you just assume for a minute, you've got a lot of organizations, I know you do out there, it's really important to start talking about how to partner with them. The problem is that it hasn't made sense to have that discussion because the vision hasn't been big enough, all right? And the vision has allowed people to silo. And that's not a criticism of the incubator, but just like many other organizations, there are not too many of the organizations, a few, and some are in this building, that are attempting to reach across the region. But a lot of what goes on is siloed in local governments and local institutions. Be one of the people that leads the discussion to partner, and I think that it'll make a big difference if you decide that you're going to start offering services to non-resident participants, so people can say, well, then people in my community can get. Or if you say you're going to focus on clean tech, it all of a sudden makes more sense to have a discussion with what's going on in Holyoke. I'm not sure it made so much sense to do it the way you're organized now. It's really, and it makes more sense to have certain focused discussions with UMass if you decide you want to help commercialize technology. But I don't think it would be wrong of them to feel that that's not much of a focus here right now. So if they're, which they are, by the way, some of you know, they are very focused on looking at applied technology, applied research, and technology commercialization. They're doing their own set of steps. It's not surprising that they didn't come down here and say, work with us. You need to express the desire and intent to focus in that area if you want to do it. You can't pick them all. I've given you more areas than you can do. So there's a set of choices to be made. And that would be, your other point is to get to that vision, you've got to look at the 9 or whatever else you come up with and say, okay, let's narrow this down to a manageable number. And all I can really tell you is you need 4 or 5 of those to become financially sustainable. probably 4, but don't count equity as one of the 4. You can make it a 5th, but don't make it your key 4. So pick 4 more and equity, and realize that equity won't produce anything for you for 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 years. Someone else, yeah.
From a strategic point of view, I'm sensing in these last several months a much greater interest in this whole area of innovation and entrepreneurship. And it's cropping up all over the region. It's being supported in many ways by the Holyoke Computing Center, but also by UMass and also by private interests. And they're becoming more visible in the spaces they're in, but they're not quite permeating the region. And I think there are voids that people are trying to fill, and this is one of them. This sort of central but disseminated center of expertise in certain areas like commercialization and startups and mentoring and so on. And I think that there's a time factor here that is important to consider, because somebody is going to capture the space pretty soon. And there's a lot of energy around doing that. And I think that for this center to move to the next level, it has to move quickly. Claim the space, or reclaim the space, reinvent the space, and listen to what else is happening around the region. We saw some of it last night at UMass. We saw these Valley Venture Mentors, another group that's sprouted up, and they're all trying to provide elements of what you outlined here. Nobody's quite got their arms around all of it. Maybe you can't ever get it around all of it. But if someone emerges as a leader in providing the majority of those services, then they'll be able to do what you just described. I think there's really a relatively short time here, 6, 9 months, to establish the vision and get out there and start to promote this idea. I really like the idea of the non-resident people. I think that's the bridge we need.
Yeah, it changes the whole conversation.
Changes the whole way I think about it, the incubator. Instead of thinking about it as a place, think about it as a service provider, and being able to reach out to these folks around the region connects it in a very different way.
Okay, so I know we have to stop. Let me end this on a positive note, okay? So I agree with what you just said. I just want to add one thing to it. To my knowledge, okay, the people in this room and the people associated with this program and this program, you're in a stronger position already, as you exist today, than anyone else that I'm aware of to do what you just described, okay? So the good news is, the bad news is, if you want to think of it that way, is the time might be limited. The good news is, when you look at the organizations housed in this building and the organizations supporting it and the ones that potentially could be pulled in quickly, I think you're in a better position than anybody in the region to do what you just described. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Great conversation, everyone. Thank you for coming.